Hey guys, this is Eckhart Slaughter. Hello and welcome to another video. I know you guys might be getting tired of this, but just a reminder that if you want to donate to the GoFundMe that I've started to help support victims of the recent tragedy in my home province, I'll put a link down in the description. But moving on, today we'll be talking about one of the most interesting and also one of the most surprisingly complex characters in Star Wars Legends, Grand Admiral Thrawn. So, for those who don't know, Grand Admiral Thrawn was a Grand Admiral within the Empire. After the death of Palpatine, he waged a massive campaign against the New Republic before dying at the Battle of Bilbringi. His campaign really pushed the New Republic back. He besieged Coruscant, he turned the New Republic against Admiral Akbar, and he won a series of stunning naval victories. However, after his death, the galaxy was forced to deal with the resurgence of Emperor Palpatine, so there wasn't a whole lot of time to dwell on things. However, much later, there was a rumor that Grand Admiral Thrawn had not only returned, but rejoined the ranks of the Empire. Unfortunately for the galaxy, given the fact that the Yuuzhan Vong were coming, Thrawn had not in fact returned. He did have a clone of himself which was being prepared, but that was destroyed, and the so-called Thrawn which had rejoined the Empire was in fact an elaborate ruse. With that brief history out of the way, what did people think of arguably the galaxy's greatest ever military mind? Well, that's what we'll be talking about in today's video. And let's touch on that first point very briefly, because it is the most obvious one. When it came to Grand Admiral Thrawn, his enemies feared him, and his allies sometimes doubted him before being awed by him. Grand Admiral Thrawn predicted things in a way that seemed completely crazy to the ordinary person. He would make assumptions and move forces in seemingly illogical ways, but his gambles nearly always paid off. This did sometimes lead to, within the Empire, a bit of friction. He would move forces away from what appeared to be an obvious target. He would be chastised by someone like Captain Pellaeon, but in the end, his hunches would almost always turn out to be correct. So despite being an alien, most people who worked with Thrawn eventually would develop a grudging respect at the very least for him. What's more, he was known to be a very fair leader. Although he was not against executing someone for the most terrible of mistakes, Thrawn would not kill somebody for making a simple error which they didn't have the chance to fix, nor would he kill somebody if they failed not due to their own fault, unlike, say, Darth Vader. Throughout the campaign especially, he did a great job at winning the hearts and minds of those serving within his fleet, and I think that that is fairly notable. Imperial rivals, i.e. those within the Empire but who didn't work with Thrawn, would have displayed, especially before Thrawn was sent to the unknown regions to begin his work on the Empire of the Hand, there would have been a lot of jealousy and competitiveness. But certainly there was a group of people who disliked Thrawn even more, and that would have been the people that he fought against. Thrawn was so good at high-level strategy, including things like fleet movements, that he was seen by some as almost omniscient. Thrawn played into this really heavily. Although he was seen as a master war strategist, a big part of how Thrawn operated was sowing deception within the ranks of his enemies. He would leave certain individuals alive after battle, just knowing that they would pass on a specific message, which would then cause confusion. Specifically, he would target high-ranking members within his opposing force's command structure and try to turn them against each other, as he did with Borskvalia and Admiral Akbar. He also used intelligence, so he could even better predict the movement of his enemies, which in the New Republic's case almost made the government fall apart, believing that there was some sort of inside source within a high level. Again, this is all very well detailed throughout the Thrawn trilogy, but I think it's more interesting to actually look at how Thrawn was treated after the war, after he was killed by Rook at the Battle of Bilbringi. The best place that we get really concrete information about that, unsurprisingly, is the Thrawn duology. Two books, Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future, which serve as a spiritual successor to the trilogy. On one hand, almost a decade later, Pellaeon still regrets the death of Thrawn, and thinks about how he was probably the only individual who could have brought the Empire back from their current situation. When it comes to, say, the New Republic, the first time Leia sees Thrawn's name in a data card stating the Hand of Thrawn, she's literally almost knocked out just by how stunned she is. As Disera and the other Imperials are creating a scheme to make it seem like Thrawn has come back alive, the galaxy is really unsure what to think. Thrawn's death at Bilbringi was very well known, but everyone also understood just how ingenious Thrawn was, and people were willing to believe that he'd either faked his death, had someone standing in for him, or prepared a clone, the latter of which would turn out to be right. Still, as he reappeared amongst Imperials, pretty much everyone that saw him was shocked, even the most well-trained stormtroopers. The same is true when Lando meets the imposter. He's just completely stunned, and it's almost like Thrawn returning would be worse than Palpatine coming back for a third time. And this wasn't only true for individuals, but galaxy-wide. Thrawn's supposed return was swaying planets to join the Imperial Remnant and destabilizing the New Republic. Again, you can read more about this in the Thrawn duology, which I very highly recommend, but the reappearance of the Grand Admiral combined with the Ka-Amos crisis is basically the closest the New Republic came to a full-scale civil war, and there wasn't even a shot fired by the Imperial Remnant. The fear also caused a lot of denial, and you can read more about that after Lando returns and as the New Republic decides what to do with his information. But let's move on, and I would say the galaxy's perception of Thrawn changed fairly significantly after the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. In the final stages of the Ka-Amos crisis, Luke and Mara Jade were warned that there was an oncoming threat, and that Grand Admiral Thrawn was not a true Imperial at heart, but rather cared about the safety of the galaxy. He had been creating a first line of defense in the unknown region called the Empire of the Hand. Of course, that mysterious force would come to be known as the Yuuzhan Vong. And I am sure when they invaded the galaxy, many wished that Thrawn had been around to unify the militaries against the massive threat. I think the best perspective of public opinion we get for this time is from the Essential Guide to Warfare, and a mini excerpt of course, a fictional article called Myth Ronda Reconsidered, a Patriot's Perspective by Lenang Opali, and it's sort of a Thrawnist, imperialist apology piece. But through implication, we can learn not only what the author is trying to argue, but also what the general public thinks of Thrawn. First of all, we know that Thrawn's connection with Palpatine early on and his efforts against the first waves of the Yuuzhan Vong were known by the public, or at least those educated within the public, as were his efforts against other factions like the Sea Ruvi. But still, given the fact that the New Republic was ultimately successful and the New Republic transitioned into the GA, which remained the dominant power, it does seem obvious that there was still a lot of resentment against Thrawn, and that despite his efforts against the Yuuzhan Vong, he was seen as an Imperial who tried to overthrow the New Republic, albeit a genius one at that. In reality, that is partially true. Thrawn was trying to overthrow the New Republic, but that's only because he believed a unified empire would be the best defense against the galaxy. Now, I don't think this is because, as presented by the author, that it was because the New Republic style of government wouldn't work against an invasion, but rather because he believed the current structure of the empire allowed for a better defense. That article is interesting too because it presents several other what I'll call conspiracy theories, including the fact that the second Death Star was actually meant as a weapon against the Yuuzhan Vong, which is not true. It would have been a good weapon, but that's not why it was created. I've done a whole video on that. And also that Thrawn himself was preparing the galaxy for the Emperor's eventual return, and that's why Thrawn's invasion and later Operation Shadowhand coincided so neatly. From what we know in both Vision of the Future and the Dark Empire sourcebook, that is not true. Palpatine got involved after Grand Admiral Thrawn's invasion because he saw the galaxy in tatters. So the sort of apologist Imperial perspective here doesn't really hold water, unsurprisingly, but I do think it's a very interesting look at the conspiracy theories that would have surrounded Grand Admiral Thrawn, and the fact that he would have remained a very contentious figure even among those in the know, and we know that from Luke and Mara directly when they're contemplating the loss of his clone in Vision of the Future. But that's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. We're going a little bit long, so I'm not going to do a hashtag AskEck question today. But if you want me to answer a future question, leave it down below with the hashtag AskEck. Make sure you subscribe, turn those notifications on, and I'll probably get to yours eventually, although I've got a lot to go through first. Anyway guys, if you want to donate, you can also do so down below. But until next time, thanks guys, be safe, and may the Force be with you.